Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of The Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, the discussion and speculation about what Trump intends to do, particularly, I mean, we have the speculation about his domestic affairs, but our particular focus is on the foreign policy. So this speculation continues. So there was some good news yesterday when Trump sent out a Truth Social message saying that Nikki Haley and Mike Pompeo will not be playing any role in his administration. And that was certainly very heartening news, because while I certainly didn't think Nikki Haley would be playing any role, I did think Mike Pompeo might be playing some kind of a role because the relations between the two seemed quite friendly, but nonetheless, he ruled that out. But there's still then really the the big the big enchilada, which is Ukraine. What is it going to do about Ukraine? Now, he doesn't have the option of doing nothing. In the way that Biden could just simply continue, or Harris would have just continued as before, so that everything is going great, everything is hunky dory. He doesn't have that option because he's made a number of very specific commitments. He has said he's going to bring this to an end, so he can't just simply forget all about it and say, well, I'm a little busy with this. I'll get on with something else. So he has to do something, and hence the media have been inundating us with peace plans. Supposedly, though Trump has never signed off on any of these peace plans, nor anyone who is thought to speak on behalf of Trump to sign off on any of these peace plans. So I just want to show you couple of things. There was the story in the Wall Street Journal, and here we have the story, which is Trump promised to end the war in Ukraine. Now he must decide how. Now the thing is obviously that we actually don't know exactly who is in Trump's inner circle. And how much influence they really wield on Trump. Trump, we don't even know who actually is particularly close to Trump. Trump doesn't really have too many close friends. So we assume that his son is close to him, but that doesn't mean that he actually listens to his son.
I always find the Wall Street Journal's titles very annoying. I mean, I think they're the only people that have titles in sentences.
I think so. Yes.
Well, his son came out telling Zelensky you have 38 days
That's right.
before the end of your allowance. Okay.
That's right.
He wouldn't say that without his father's blessing. I'm sure of that. Okay.
Yes, I guess so. But again,
or is that part of the strategy?
Who knows? Because Trump has also said other things. He's also said, that Ukraine is really very important to American security. Ukraine is very important to us. So, it's there's no question that Trump wants to bring this thing to an end. But the question is, how are you going to do it? And so he's made that say. He said it's gonna be very easy. Well, now what are you going to do? And we sort of assume that to get anywhere, he would have to present a peace plan. I mean, he could do a kind of a mediator thing. He'll go to Russia, says, what will you settle for? What's the minimum you'll settle for? He'll go to Ukraine, what's the minimum you'll settle for? And then try to find halfway there, between them. But since the two sides are so far apart, it's hard to see how halfway between them is going to get anywhere.
Yeah, but you've really hit the nail on the head right here, and this is something that is not talked about enough, if at all. It's not Ukraine that's going to be making any of these decisions. Okay, right. So I mean, I suppose a courtesy call. Where do you stand in all this? But it's a courtesy call. Right. Okay, it would be public relations. No, it's a deal, and this is something that for the entire course of this conflict, the supporters of the Biden administration of NATO, they don't want to admit that this is a proxy war against Russia. And so Trump is essentially going to be, he may not use that word, those words, but he knows if he wants to end this, because he has a very bold domestic agenda. He's gonna have his hands full.
Right,
Okay.
right,
And I think that's why he wants to wrap this thing up. He's going to have to make a deal with the Russians.
right,
Okay. And the
right,
Russians hold a lot of cards right now. Okay.
right,
So it's not, to find the middle ground between the Ukrainians and the Russians. That's fairy tale.
right,
That's, that's
right,
NATO language.
right,
That's Biden language. It's not the case.
right. No, I agree. I mean, I absolutely agree that, when it comes to Ukraine, essentially the Americans are calling the shots. Now, the Americans were very happy under Biden and NATO was very happy to keep the war going because it wasn't really costing them very much. Certainly wasn't, just send them arms. Yeah, the European economies weren't doing well, but it wasn't really such a huge problem. And
That was essentially the goal. The
the
goal
goal
was
exactly,
going.
yeah, exactly, subordinate Europe to the United States. So there was never really any incentive for the Americans ever to apply pressure on Zelensky. So now you're absolutely right. Trump has an ambitious domestic agenda, and he doesn't want to get essentially bogged down with this. Remember, in 18 months, the midterm election campaign begins in earnest. So just so he's only got 18 months, which isn't very long. So if he's going to do something, he has to do it now. The question then is, will he basically pull the plug on Ukraine? I mean that I mean that really is an open question. Of course, America can do it, but the question is, will he do it?
Well, also, if we go back even to the 2016 campaign, remember when Trump famously said, I'm paraphrasing here. Is Crimea Russia or part of Russia, Ukraine? Well, let the Europeans figure
Right,
it
right,
out.
right.
And I think that's going to
Yes,
be part and parcel of his approach, is that if it's such a big deal to you people, then you figure it out. Okay.
right.
And
In a,
and I have said this for a long, long time. Once the U.S. Or a Biden administration takes his foot off the accelerator, then the Baltic states, and then Romania, and then the Poles will say, well, Russia is a problem, but it's not really the security threat that we thought it was, because they don't want to pay for it.
no, they don't want to pay for it, and
And they know, look, the Donbass has not been liberated. Folks, it's still parts of it's under Kiev's control. This is 2.5 years, almost
yeah.
3 years now. Okay. And they're going to be marching into Berlin
Yeah, of course. I mean
that's ridiculous. And see, this is again with Trump. Is he playing checkers with us, or is he playing, five-dimensional chess? We don't know. But one thing is for sure is that if the U.S. will no longer designate the Russia the threat the Biden level threat, then the threat goes down dramatically. I mean, don't you think that someone like Schultz will say, well, maybe we could rebuild that pipeline?
Right, but that's really that goes to the heart of it, because he of course he can just simply say to the Europeans, hey, you take care of it. And the moment he does it, the Europeans say, well, we can't take care of it. We don't have the resources to do it. We don't have a military industrial complex the way you have.
Trump will say, figure it out.
He could. No, you're right. He could. But then you have to say, but has Trump in the past ever done that? I mean, then that's really the issue. And we were talking earlier today about, will Trump, in the first term be the same as the Trump in the second term? And you can say we can't possibly assume that he'll be exactly the same. He may be very different. But that ultimately, that's what it's going to come down to.
What you're directly referencing is to escalate to de-escalate. Okay.
Right.
We saw that with North Korea. We saw that with Iran.
Well, but that really gets to the heart of it, because, well, all right. Let's take a look first of all at the peace plan.
No, so George, your words and opinions are so much more interesting than this drivel. You did the work. Let's do it.
All right. So here we have, like in Trump's first term, different factions are set to compete to influence the Republicans' foreign policy. More traditionally minded allies such as Mike Pompeo, the former secretary. So this was already written before Pompeo's ouster. Yeah, I like it to push for a settlement that doesn't appear to give a major win to Moscow. Other advisors, particularly Richard Grenell, a top candidate to lead the State Department or serve as national security advisor, could give a priority to Trump's desire to end the war as soon as possible, even if it means forcing Kiev into significant concessions. And that's it.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't want to trivialize here. Can you go back here
Sure.
just real? Okay. Okay, are likely to push for a settlement that doesn't appear to give a major win to my. Well, see, that's what spin is all about. What does that mean? What is a major win? What is a see? This is going to be part of the narrative management here. Okay, and I think I'm going to keep an eye on that and how they're going to pitch something. Okay, because obviously they don't want to give a win to Moscow. Okay, how are they going to explain it as a win for America, a win for the West, a win for that's what I'm going to be watching. Go ahead. Next slide.
Right.
Go ahead.
No, that's right. That's right. The proposals all break from Biden's approach of letting Kiev dictate when peace talks should begin.
Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. Instead, they uniformly recommend freezing the war in place, cementing Russia's seizure of Russia of roughly 20% of Ukraine, and forcing Ukraine to temporarily suspend its quest to join NATO. But as we discussed, I mean, this really doesn't amount to very much because um, you know, Ukraine is de facto a NATO member state. It signed all of these bilateral security agreements with all the key NATO states, so they're already on the hook, so to speak, as much as Article 5 puts anyone on the hook. They're already on the hook to come to Ukraine's aid. So therefore, that doesn't really mean very much to say, oh, we're just going to postpone this for 20 years. Besides, what happens when the 20 years are up. So that's not really anything very much. Um, one idea.
Well, obviously, in this paragraph here, did anybody ask the Russians if that's acceptable?
No,
Let's see.
nobody ever asks. But yeah, one idea proposed inside Trump's transition office, detailed by three people close to the president-elect, and not previously abroad, would involve Kiev promising not to join again. The 20 years. All right. In exchange, the US would continue to pump Ukraine full of weapons to deter future Russian attack. But that's a given. I mean, whatever comes out through all these negotiations, the one thing that we can be absolutely sure of, America is going to absolutely throw everything into Ukraine, dump enormous amount of weaponry and into Ukraine. Ukraine would just really will be almost sink under the weight of American military hardware that's going to go there. So I think that's a given.
And the Russians are expected to sit on the
Well, that's
sidelines.
exactly.
Well, I mean, obviously the terms and conditions are different, but they're essentially trying to sell us Minsk 3.
No, I think that's right. I think that's exactly right. Minsk 3, except that there won't be even the fig leaf of integration within Ukraine. So whatever territory is currently under Russian occupation would just simply be integrated within the Russian Federation. But there won't be any kind of the rest of it. I mean, like the constitutional change. Ukraine's not going to deliver on any constitutional change. Like, oh, we promise we're not going to hire any Nazis, or we promise we make Russian an official language. That's not going to happen. And the Americans are not going to push Ukraine into in making any kind of concession like that. Under the plan, the front line would essentially lock in place and both sides would agree to an 800-mile demilitarized zone. Who would police that territory remains unclear. But one advisor said that the peacekeeping force wouldn't involve American troops, nor come from a US-funded international body such as the United Nations. And this is when they say we can do training and other support, but the barrel of the gun is going to be European. A member of the Trump team said. This is where it gets fantasy. If you can start bringing in Europeans, you're bringing in NATO. I mean, you're bringing NATO into Ukraine. I don't see how the Russians could possibly tolerate that. We are not sending America.
And they won't.
No, they
because
won't.
what was it all for?
Right. We are not sending American men and women to uphold peace in Ukraine, and we are not paying for it. Get the Poles, Germans, British, and French to do it. So
Well,
yeah.
it's not, I think a poll I saw yesterday, I think 67% of Poles are against sending Polish troops to Ukraine.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Did anybody ask anybody in Warsaw?
No, no.
Or is it the price of doing business? Is it the price of being in NATO? I mean, now they're going to start realizing what the price is. Okay.
Right, right,
Belatedly, but
right.
they're going to be.
But there's no way that the Russians will accept it. I mean, it's just it just cannot happen. Because that would be a complete defeat. I mean, if in effect, I mean, you've now accepted NATO's presence in Ukraine. I mean, that's just simply, that would be a complete defeat for Russia. That proposal, in some respects, echoes comments made by Vice President-elect J.D. Vance during a September interview when he suggested a final agreement between Ukraine and Russia could involve a demilitarized zone, heavily fortified so the Russians don't invade again. Russia, Vance continued, could get to keep land it has taken and be assured of Ukraine's neutrality, but Ukraine won't be neutral. I mean, we already know this, so that's not going to happen. Ukraine will not be neutral.
Well, I mean, then why do you have a demilitarized zone? I mean, if it's neutral, you don't, if they
Right.
declare neutrality,
I
you
mean,
don't need to do
right. I mean,
demilitarized zone.
if you're already arming it to the teeth, which is, I think, part of this plan, you're going to keep, pouring in huge amounts of arms. It's already not neutral
Yeah.
because along with the arms come trainers and so on. So that just can't happen. But what I think is, and Zelensky, whose country is heavily dependent on the U.S. for military and financial assistance, could more easily than Putin be forced by Trump to negotiate. But the Ukrainian leader would have to contend with a public that views ceding territory as capitulation to Moscow.
Yeah, well, that's the bill of goods that the Biden administration sold them.
But
And as I love to repeat here, Zelensky's not a victim here. He's a volunteer. This
yeah,
is what he volunteered for.
right.
Yep.
That's right. Trump has said that Ukraine's survival is important to the U.S., but has repeatedly criticized Zelensky, calling him the greatest salesman. But that's not necessarily a criticism because Trump is himself a salesman. That's what he's done all his life. So when he says, "Oh, he's the greatest salesman," that's a an expression of admiration. I mean that's what Trump's done. All he
Well, I
sells
don't know.
himself. He sells the brand.
It's again, this is, trying to decipher Trump speak. I mean, obviously you can, did he say it with sarcasm and
Right.
irony?
Right.
Yeah. Is it a straight up a description of Zelensky? You could also say yes. It's one of those
Right.
because a lot of Trump supporters that are against this the
Yes.
Ukraine project will say, yeah, he's just a great salesman. So I mean, again, Trump, he squares the circle.
Right.
Was it intentional? I don't know.
It's very skillful. It's very,
Yes,
very skilled. Because
absolutely.
when I read it, he says he's the greatest salesman. I took it to be an expression of admiration. I didn't take it at all to be negative. Oh, that's really very negative.
I
It didn't
took it
sound
as
negative to me.
I took it both ways. He's a con artist. Okay.
Right. There's a kind of, but when Trump, who puts his name on all these buildings, he's selling himself. He's selling the brand. I mean, that everything. Trump vodka, Trump steak, Trump air. He's selling himself. So a stance that has worried some officials in Kiev that a Trump-led U.S. might push for a settlement that favors Russia. Now, the thing is, and if you go back then, if Trump, I mean, Trump has to do something. If Trump does present a plan and a peace plan, something along these lines, and it goes nowhere because as the way it goes nowhere. What does Trump do then? Does Trump just simply say, okay, well, I did my best, and then we'll just continue as before? He can't do that because he said, hey, but you said you would bring it to an end. You said that you're the master negotiator. You're going to end it. So he's going to have to do something. And then the question is, whom does he bash over the head? Does he bash Zelensky over the head, or does he bash the Russians over the head? I mean, it could go either way. But
Yeah, but
he'll have
also,
to, once that peace plan goes nowhere, he's going to have to take measures against one side or the other.
well, this is going to be the first and probably the most telling test of his foreign policy in the second term. Have you rooted out all the Vindmans? Are they gone?
Right.
You know, is there a Fiona Hill worming her way into the National
Right.
Security Council? No, I
Right.
mean he's got multiple fronts to deal with
Yeah.
here. The Russians are the least of his problems,
Right.
actually.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
because this is a consensus issue within the security and military establishments, and
Right.
you think they're going to say, "Yeah, let's give Trump's plan a shot. You know, why not? Let's do something." No, they won't. They'll do
I agree,
everything.
and that's why, if he were to go down that path of saying, you know what, I did my best, I put forward a plan. I'm really sick of Ukraine. I'm going to just cut it off. The way people just talk, he's going to cut it off. He will encounter such ferocious resistance that somebody else, maybe a younger, more energetic man, would be able to deal with it. I'm not sure that Trump is. I mean, we've seen Trump in the past when he encounters enormous resistance, he kind of caves.
Yep. And and
Yeah.
and all the more so. And he never did it. George and I counseled him through this medium that we have here. This was Biden's war. Why
Yes. Yeah.
needed to hammer
Right.
away at that? Okay, Biden is
Yeah.
gone.
Right.
Okay,
Right. He should have. Yeah.
again, I just think this is the test, and right now I don't think he's going to pass. I don't think he's going to. I don't.
I kind of agree with you. I mean, I think there's a lot of wishful thinking going on, understandably, and it's true. He's got some, he's going to have some good people around him. He's going to have Tucker Carlson, but Tucker Carlson is on the outside. I mean, he'll be there, with his counsel. But how much did he listen to Tucker Carlson when he was, he was in the during his first term? I mean, he bombed Syria, even though Tucker Carlson advised him not to. He nonetheless bombed Syria. So, yeah, there'll be some people advising him this is not a good thing to do, but, to whom will he listen?
What my counsel would be the following: spread out the blame, spread out the downside. What do I mean by that? Be bold and said, look, NATO, as it was designed and functioned during the Cold War, was nice and fine. Okay, it's history now. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We see that these same structures have not created peace and stability in Europe. We need a new look. I'm not saying shut down NATO. I'm not saying that. No, but we need a new architecture. We got to bring in all of the stakeholders. Everybody, sorry, everybody's got to sit in the same room and you got to
Right.
start talking. No,
Right, but he's not.
hang on, George. I know what you're going to say. What I'm saying is that spread it out and show that if we really want to solve this, it's not going to be a demilitarized zone. It's not going to solve anything here, okay? Particularly not in the eyes of the Russians. But be bold and get out there and say, we have to rethink all of this because the way we've been working has created this here. Now, that's a very bold, it's not bold for me to say it. It's not bold for you to say it, but it would be bold for the president of the United States to say
It would be, and really, if you get right down to it, he has criticized NATO, but what's the one thing that he's always criticized NATO for? That is, hey, we Americans are carrying the load. You should, pay more. That's it. That's his mentality. Hey, you should pay more. And he goes on, and he said this repeatedly in his stump speech. Hey, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg praised me. He praised me for all that I've done for NATO because I managed to get everybody in NATO to cough up more money. And so he, in effect, if they really have coughed up more money, he's made NATO stronger. He's actually done filled up its coffers. So that's the extent of it. The whole issue, which I think he should be addressing, which is NATO is undermining security in Europe and everywhere else. And you as you say, you have to kind of rethink security so that it's actually genuinely a partnership. Everyone feels secure, not just the NATO member states. He's never said that. He has never addressed that issue. And I don't know anyone who's close to Trump who actually does think along those lines.
okay, let's put on our thinking caps here. What's Viktor Orban for? Victor, come on over
Right.
and let's talk. How do we do this? Okay. Now, I know that, Viktor Orban's not going to win a popularity contest in Europe. But as you and I have said in the recent past, he's Trump's conduit in Europe right now, almost standing alone. Okay. Victor, we need you to step up. We have to start working through. It's difficult. Viktor
Right.
Orban would do it. He would do it.
He would do it, but I mean, I just don't think that that's I don't think that's the way Trump thinks. I really don't. I really, you're right. You're absolutely right. If it were up to Viktor Orban, he would say exactly that. Hey, we have to think in terms of a security in which no one in Europe feels threatened. That's what we have to think about. We just, the idea of creating this alliance and ganging up on Russia, that's a really bad idea, and it was always going to end in disaster. And that's what Orban has said repeatedly.
Because of the common sense that George and I are speaking right now. It's pure common sense. It's not to anyone's disadvantage. It's not to anyone's overwhelming advantage. Okay. Trying to find some kind of win-win. But
Right.
George, you and I both know, and we've known this from day one, if we don't go in the direction that you and I have just been speaking about, it won't be resolved.
It won't be
You,
resolved.
I know.
Sure. That it won't be resolved. And I think then that's why I think the most likely outcome is that, yes, he's going to put forward a peace plan. I think it'll be something along these lines, some variation along these lines. And it's going to be rejected.
And then
And then I think he's going to go against Russia. I think he's going to blame Russia for it.
Escalation.
And then escalation. And then he's got a disaster on his hands. I mean, basically, his agenda is already, was going nowhere. The moment the Democrats take the House, that's the end of his domestic program. And in fact, he's going to be fighting off impeachment because they're going to come in. And first order of business is to impeach Trump. So he's going to be impeaching. He'll be fighting off impeachment right during his second part of his second term.
Yeah, and meanwhile, what's going on in the Middle East? What's going
Yeah.
on in Palestine, Israel? What's
Right.
going on in Iran? I mean,
Right.
George and I have just talked about one little sliver of the
Yeah.
pie.
Right.
Okay. And then depending on who he has around him, the China hawks.
Right.
This is good. They're going to say, of course, they're going to want Trump to succeed when it comes to
Right.
Ukraine.
Right.
But what Trump could get, and he's not even been inaugurated yet, but what he could get is failure with Russia, failure in the Middle East, failure with China.
Right. No, that's exactly right. And the example. I mean, Michael Tracy kind of brought up the example. Oh well, look, he says, oh, Trump would be like Nixon. Nixon in '68 promised to end the war, but then he went on. He escalated the war, and it just went on and on after that. Yeah, but first of all, Nixon did bring the war, the American involvement in the war, to an end at the end of his first term. But he actually did create the kind of a security, a kind of global security architecture in which the importance of Vietnam, was much diminished once he sort of established this relationship with the Soviet Union, and then also brought on China into the mix. The whole issue of Vietnam and who's going to run Saigon diminished in importance, and that's what Nixon actually succeeded. Here, Trump could find himself just continuing Biden's war, but now everyone is going to just pile on and say Trump promised to end this. It's got worse. It's worse now than it was under Biden.
With all due respect to Michael Tracy, I think he's a very intrepid guy, but I don't agree with him on
I
this
don't. No.
for many reasons. First of all, Nixon was the it was his White House, it was his Defense Department, it was his State Department,
Right.
and he was head of the party. No one was challenging him. Okay,
Right.
Nixon had a lot of institutional leeway. Trump doesn't have that.
No.
Okay,
No,
he has the afterglow of an unbelievable victory, historic, unprecedented. We can go on and on about that, but
right.
it doesn't mean much. It
No.
doesn't mean much when the metal hits the road.
Right.
Okay,
Not at all. Not at all. Elections, disappear very quickly. By next week, this will be ancient history. That what happened on Tuesday. Because we're on to the next thing. What are you going to do with this majority? Because you've got a lot of problems to address. What are you going to do? I mean, just simply say, hey, I won this great victory, and what's the plan? And that's why I think that this could be an absolute fiasco for him,
And what
unless he really was bold and imaginative.
that's right.
But he had opportunities to do that. He had opportunities to demonstrate that in his first term, and he didn't do it.
And what is okay, everybody knows Washington's about horse trading. Trump has a very bold domestic agenda.
Right.
What is he going to have to trade to get that? Okay. It's going to get down to very, very dirty arm wrestling.
Yeah.
I could say things more harshly, but I mean, he's going to have, you want this, then we want that. And he's going to be torn. He's going to be torn. A lot of it has to do, one of the strange things about Trump is that Nixon was intelligent enough to let someone like Henry Kissinger be around him. Okay. Trump, I don't think is that way. He's not going to let because he saw all of the betrayal during his
Right.
first administration, and I think he's very paranoid about that right now.
Right.
Rick
No,
Rick Grinnell, he's more of a yes man in
yeah.
my eyes than a
I,
foreign
I
policy.
I agree, because if one thinks about Trump's team, it's very lightweight. I mean, you don't have a Kissinger around you. I mean, Greg Grinnell, Kash Patel, Steve Bannon. I mean, these are apparatchiks or hatchet
But
men.
they don't have gravitas.
They don't have gravitas. But you're right. I mean, because if he wants to enact his domestic agenda, he's going to need the support of various Republicans on the Hill, and then they might go along with his domestic agenda, but then they'll say, hey, but we're not going to go along with your foreign policy agenda. So yeah, I mean, let's say if it's Rick Scott will become the Senate Majority Leader. Rick Scott, he's a hawk on Ukraine. And he said, yeah, okay, I'll go along with your domestic agenda, but hey, I'm not going to support you if you decide to abandon Ukraine. So it's going to be very difficult for him, if he wants to maintain support on the Hill, because this is the big one. I mean, it's this for some reason. This running this empire is the most important thing in Washington. So if you do this, you say, hey, essentially, we're going to pull the plug on Ukraine. We're going to admit that we lost. We're going to give this great victory to Putin. That requires, the Republicans are not going to go along with that.
George, at this point in time, if there isn't a bold vision to
Right.
rethink the world, that the empire will just continue on
Yeah.
this path, and it will be very dangerous for all of us. Okay, Trump has the opportunity to do this. He's got an opportunity to bold something different.
Right.
I don't think either party is prepared. Well, number one, the Democrats won't get. I mean, it's we've heard it before. If Trump cured cancer, personally
No. Yeah.
cured cancer,
No.
come on,
No.
it still wouldn't get any credit for it. Okay, they're
I
not going to let him have a win.
no. No.
They're not
No.
going to have any wins.
No. No. Not at all. And I tend to think that the strange absence of resistance to Trump means that a decision has been made. Let Trump carry the can. Let Trump be burdened by all of these crises. He's going to get blamed for everything. Let him carry the blame, because we kind of expect that there'll be a massive resistance, there'll be riots, bloodshed on the streets, and so on. It hasn't happened. The Democrats are strangely quiescent. Yeah, well, we lost this election. We lost it fair and square. And so
Well, I
I,
mean,
I, I kind of, I'm generally a conspiratorial thinker. So I think, well, hey, there must be a reason why they seem not all that unhappy to see Trump take over.
I can buy into that. I agree with you. Okay, because his victory. I mean, just before we convened, I was looking at some fresh numbers. I mean, this is
Right.
unbelievable. I mean, it
Right.
was just a watershed, and this was a complete blowout. Okay, it's hard to make the case. Okay, that's why I think they're quiescent at this point. Is that there's not much material to work with here.
Right.
Okay, but let him fail. Okay,
Yeah.
again, they want the country to fail. They want the world to fail.
Right.
They don't want diplomacy. They don't want peace.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
And so yeah, why don't you give him give him an open lane, let him go. I think that's what where
I
they're
think
going.
they are, and
But
that's why.
but I personally think Ukraine is going to come crashing down on him very quickly,
Very
very.
quick. I agree very quickly because that's the one that he was the most explicit about dealing with very, very quickly. Remember, he actually said, "Hey, I'm going to get it done before I even take the oath of office." Now, I don't know how he was planning on doing that because, of course, when you're the president elect, you don't just get to run your own diplomacy. But so, but nonetheless, everyone's waiting for him. Okay, then that's hence all these stories about this. We've got this peace plan, or that peace plan, because he has to do something. You made this promise, and they're going to keep him to that because they know this is going to be a real mess for him. And so I,
Well, and also built into so much of the worthless commentary and punditry on this. All of it in toto is junk as far as I'm concerned. Nothing that I've read over the last few days makes any sense to me. It's a wish list. The Russians don't take it seriously. He's not in power yet. Okay. And these plans are talking at the Russians. They're not talking with the Russians. This is the beginning of a train wreck. Okay. So, and they feel under pressure. I mean, like, uh-oh, well, we won. Uh-oh, we said we'd solve it in one day
right.
before the inauguration. Yeah, they're feeling the heat already.
Yeah, no, that's right, and the media, of course, doing their bit for it because they're saying, "Well, where is it? You said you were going to do it. Where's your peace plan, bro? You said, this is so. What are you going to do?" And now there is, of course, the question. I mean, this is what where the who if is there someone who's going to be very smart? Now, the Israelis have been have traditionally been very, very skilled at showing falsely that they're interested in a peace plan. Yeah, we're interested in this peace plan. Yeah, we're down for that. And then they get the other side to be the rejectionist party. So they're the ones that reject us. We accepted this. It's like all going all the way back to the UN partition plan. Which Israel didn't accept, but everyone is always convinced that Israel accepted it. So then the question is, who's going to play that game with Trump, pretend to accept the Trump peace plan, and then and force the other side to be the rejectionist party.
Yeah, yeah. Again, has nothing to do with Ukraine. It'll have everything to do with a strategic defeat very early in Trump's administration. I mean, again, Michael Tracy comparing it to Nixon. I mean, no, the war had been going on a long time. It wasn't his war. He said he was going to end it, and he ended it through escalation,
Right,
everyone.
right.
But there were bigger pieces on the board, as George has already pointed out.
That was the
There's a
key. Yes, sir.
restructuring of the
That's
international
right.
system, and this is what George and I are supporting.
That's
Sure, we could. I very much think that we could see an escalation. I think that there's really no other alternative given the way the pieces are on the board. But that could be a singular directional move to resetting things. But
right.
there's no one's talking about that. Nixon, that was what
That's
was
it.
in.
No, exactly. That's exactly it. And that's what happened then in 1972, the sort of the final year, the year of the visit to China, the year of the visit to Moscow, so that by the time Hanoi mounted its offensive, it didn't even have the support of the Soviet Union or China behind it. They were basically, no, we've got other fish to fry. We're more concerned now with signing all kinds of agreements with the United States. So that was a major transformation of the world, where somehow defeat in Vietnam would sounded like the worst thing that could possibly happen. It would be defeat for the United States, the US led order. No, suddenly it just wasn't really that important anymore. That was a masterful diplomacy. And you're right. I mean, again, if Trump could certainly, escalate and then make a bold move for what we have talked about, Helsinki 2.0, or some kind of global conference to discuss everyone's security needs. He could do something like that, but I don't see it. Kash Patel and Rick Grinnell, I don't see them as having being in any way visionary in that sense, or Don Jr. or anything like that.
Yeah, because I mean, Mr. Patel and people like that, I admire and respect, but I mean, I think you need like 25 more years of experience to
Right,
do
right, right. You,
it.
you
But
exactly. That's right.
yeah, I mean, none of these guys have ever done any heavy lifting in anything. Okay, because you know why, George? Because their first default position is being a pundit and an advocate for the president and president-elect. I get that.
Right,
That's normal. Okay, but who's got the secret plan? Nixon had the secret plan in
right,
his head.
right.
Okay,
That's right.
and
Yeah,
he skillfully, masterfully
right,
played it out
right,
and had his minion, Henry
right,
Kissinger, do it for him. We
right,
don't have any of those pieces on the board, right? Not
right.
remotely.
No, that's exactly right, and I think that's why the way Michael Tracy presents it is frankly silly. I mean, had Nixon just walked away in 1969, which is what people say, oh, we should have just left in 69, that wouldn't have been any way a good deal for the United States. It would have been actually a complete debacle, because the United States would have just simply walked away with its tail between its legs. I mean, it was a masterful by doing it within that context of a complete global transformation. So suddenly, America could come out of it, with what was peace with honor, but he's now got good relations with, America's geopolitical adversaries, and he's now got this complicated triangulation relationship with the Soviet Union and China. So, that was a that was a masterful maneuver by Nixon, and he was rewarded. I mean, that was his massive victory was a reward. Say, hey, this guy knows what he's doing.
And he was pushing through his domestic agenda at the
Exactly.
same time.
Right.
He could walk and chew gum.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But what Nixon didn't have to worry about, at least until the nonsense called Watergate, which
Right.
was nonsense. Okay.
Right.
Nixon didn't have to walk, looking over both sides of his shoulders there. Trump from day one, even before he's
Right.
looking over both sides.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
a far more diminished position. Okay.
Yeah.
But, again, I mean, the way out of this is to have a bold visionary plan. And I think the Russians would get on board with it.
Yeah.
Helsinki 2.0, I think they'd be there in a heartbeat. I really do.
Yeah,
I
I think
really
so
do.
too. Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
So, peacekeepers, 800-mile DMZ. Well, no,
Right.
no, no, none of this makes any
Right.
sense.
Right.
George is right. NATO's already in Ukraine.
Right.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
All righty. I suppose, George, because the clock is ticking, we'll be talking about this again real soon.
I think
Okay.
so. I mean, I think
With
what
all the
else are we
drips
going to
and
talk about
grabs.
this? Yeah, this whole transition process. It takes forever. I mean, he won't be president for quite a long time. It's more than 2 months. So, what else are we going to be talking about other than what's he going to do on day one?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, this is like, reified criminology. What is Trump doing? He's gone quiet.
I was going to say that it strikes me as being very odd. I was expecting him to hold news conferences, doing interviews, essentially doing a kind of victory laps, day
After
after
party.
day of victory laps.
After party.
Exactly, and strange. No news conference. At the very least, I thought he would hold a news conference, celebrating his victory and saying, "Yeah, I was playing for that. This is, I had
Okay.
everything planned out from the beginning." So
I had Arizona wired to
exactly. I knew
the
exactly.
county.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, right from the start, I knew exactly how the cards would fall.
Oh, he's back.
But straight, he's gone very quiet, very, very quiet. He's just vanished.
Yeah, well,
I mean, you could say he's resting, but he's not someone who rests. He's not a holiday person. He doesn't go on vacation.
maybe he's taking stock of
Yeah,
what is ahead of him.
right.
And I hope he's got some wise, sober unemotional people saying, Mr. President-elect, you got
Yeah,
your work cut out for you.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
The mess that you're in. Can you think historically who's inherited a mess of this magnitude?
Of this magnitude, the only person I can think of is Nixon in '68. He inherited Vietnam, which was already tearing the country apart.
But he
And
did have a plan. See, that's the difference. He
right,
did have a
yeah,
plan.
exactly. So that was, yeah, but I can't think of anyone else with that. I mean, things were bad when Reagan took over, but America wasn't really directly involved, and Vietnam was really just tearing. It was America was directly involved, suffering huge casualties, and he was tearing the country apart. So he was, that's a, he had a huge problem on his
Well,
hands.
I mean, and then obviously Abraham Lincoln,
Right?
uh,
Yeah. No,
because of the secession of the South, it turned into a foreign policy in,
right.
in an odd way, foreign
Right.
policy issue.
Right.
But see, that's how we're going to finish off. Abraham Lincoln came in a crisis, and he prevailed. He
Right.
prevailed. In my opinion, probably the greatest president in the United States. Okay. Nixon, the country's tearing itself to shreds.
Hmm.
Nixon came in, he had a plan.
Right.
He
Right.
prevailed. Okay. Donald Trump, that's where you are. You want your legacy. For George and I and many other people, Nixon is a great president, but no one denies that Abraham Lincoln was a great
Right.
president.
Right.
So this is you're in that space right now. You're in that historical
Right.
space.
Right, right.
Will you
That's right.
prevail?
That's right. That's right. No, I think it's a very interesting point. Why has Trump gone so quiet? I mean, is he really now taking stock of the situation and what he's actually going to do? Because it's unlike him. Days have gone by, and he sent out a few things on Truth Social, but that's not like him. He's usually up front and doing interviews, Sean Hannity and news conference, at the very least a news conference. So very, 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 he may well be, as you say, taking stock and
Yeah,
deciding,
well, I
hey,
mean,
I got a real problem on my hands.
it's very unlike him because if he were true to form, he would be calling up Joe Rogan and saying, "Let me do a 3 hour,
Right, exactly. Yeah.
play by play how I pulled off the greatest American
Yeah, yeah,
comeback in history."
that's right. That's right. It's so that is something to think about.
All right. And we will be thinking about it. All righty.
Exactly.
That's our Sunday wrap here. This is The Gaggle with Peter and George. We're on Local, so please go to thegaggle.locals.com. Tomorrow we have a live stream. I will be stepping up and I'll be doing an hour later with George. And
Yeah,
then George goes solo on
on
Tuesday.
Tuesday, exactly. So 10 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow, and then 3 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday. And think about those hounds. It's getting very, very cold in Moscow. These dogs. They used to Mexican style siestas. They don't like winter in Moscow, so they're not in a good mood. And the tip jar that doesn't go on filling itself up, that's just putting them into an even worse mood. So, if you want to sort of keep them going through this brutal winter, please dunk a few coins into their tip jar. So we're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. And the more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve on the technology. And above all, we're going to help the dogs get through this winter. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye-bye.